know, more and more of their work consists of collecting and interpreting intel to keep their clients safe, and much of that intel is collected online. That's why I wanted to speak with my guest today, Kyle Baker, an OSINT analyst here at Liferaft. Kyle advises clients on how to use open web sources to safeguard their operations. Today, we're going to discuss the role OSINT can play in keeping principals safe. We'll also share some practical tips and tricks you can apply yourself. Kyle, thanks for chatting with me today.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Before jumping into our main topic, I just wanted to circle back to your background. What originally piqued your interest in OSINT? How did you get interested in this field?
Great question. OSINT, I think, is the type of thing that you're neck deep in before you are even aware of that. I grew up alongside platforms like Google. I was 10 years old when Google was created and started to become popular. So I was using OSINT all of my life. I remember showing my mom that she doesn't need to actually ask Jeeves questions and can just type in keywords to get to the result that she's looking for as quickly as possible. I had a few wins early on with OSINT, long before I knew that there was a possibility of a career working with that beyond being a private investigator or a marketing researcher. Things like doing background checks on friends' love interests when social media started to become popular. I remember finding a friend's birth mother who had moved from Newfoundland to Germany by connecting her maiden name with her new last name by following some address and phone number databases. In high school, I accidentally accessed other students' online portals by changing the ID and the URLs. I thought they would have appreciated the innocent exposure of the vulnerability, but instead told my parents that I had hacked the website, which I thought was pretty funny because I am definitely not a hacker. When I started working in the corporate world, I took some free time and ended up stumbling on an email from an ex-employee of the company that they had posted online by searching for their domain and excluding popular results. And it ended up being a much bigger deal than I had anticipated. So when I discovered Liferaft and Navigator, a lot of these past experiences started to click, and I've been fully immersed in the open source intelligence world and threat monitoring ever since.
I've met so many different types of OSINT analysts. You find those with, the more traditional security backgrounds like military and law enforcement, but then you also find the folks with backgrounds in IT, business, or arts. It just seems so diverse as a field and a career path. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely, yes. And that is what makes the OSINT community so important, because everybody does bring different strengths with their different backgrounds that they have and has a different approach. They look at things differently. Creativity is extremely important in OSINT, trying to develop new ways to search things using the correct key terms. If you hit a wall, you need to find a way around or over or through that wall. So you really have to be diverse in your approach.
More of a mindset, being curious, and more importantly, being persistent.
Yes, exactly. Just because you don't find something on the first pass doesn't mean that you won't on the second, third, or fourth, or in a month from now as new information continues to surface.
In your original answer, I didn't hear a lot about formal courses. It's a lot more about playing around, trial and error. How did you develop your OSINT skill set?
Yeah, I think it's very much trial and error, as well as just using those same OSINT techniques that you apply to your work to your learning. So recognizing bias behind the sources that you're reading. If you look particularly for positive reviews around a product, you're probably going to miss some negative ones. So removing that bias from your search and your search terminology as well. Reading how-to guides. There's so much information on the internet with how to access different databases, best practices, best ways to do things. Just read and immerse yourself in that community. And if you don't have the opportunity to communicate with others directly in your kind of regular life, person to person, get involved in some of those OSINT communities. Join some Slack groups, some Discord channels, some boards, and get involved in those discussions. And the learning will just keep on going.
There's so much information out there once you start poking around.
Absolutely.
So let's circle back to executive protection. What value can OSINT provide when trying to keep a principal like a CEO or a VIP safe?
You don't want to wait for a threat actor to act. What we do here at Liferaft is we cast a net to try to capture as many of those threatening content and the grievances at their early stages before they bubble up into somebody that's about to take action towards an executive. So de-escalate those individuals early on, identify them, and keep an eye on their kind of growth of emotion over time. So previously, as you said, it was waiting to jump in front of the bullet. Let's address these issues and report these individuals before they even pick up a gun.
Do you have any interesting examples from your work?
Absolutely. I build a lot of executive protection content for our clients, both for product demonstration and as frameworks for them to utilize as active monitoring. And there's not very many industries or companies that don't have some type of issue and anger directed towards them, their executive or their brands as a whole, that would bubble over to the executive team. There's a wide variety of grievances that people have, from things like actual grievances from high risk dismissals that they have their anger and frustration directed at an individual, conspiracy theorists that are planning vigilante raids on celebrities' homes, similar to what we saw with Pizzagate and the kind of Save the Children hashtag that was trending over the summer, to people that are just angry about their cell phone bills or poor cell phone service that want to take that frustration out on an individual. So what we'll do is listen for mentions of those executives alongside key terms that are potential early indicators, as I mentioned, so that the security teams can help mitigate those risks and address those vulnerabilities as quickly as possible.
So let's imagine we're in the GSOC of a Fortune 500 company. I'm a security analyst, or I'm an EP consultant. We're protecting a CEO. Walk me through how you would advise me to set up an OSINT monitoring program.
Definitely. So I think that there are common high risk terms that apply across the board to executives. Things like addresses, general escalatory and threatening language, individuals that are fixated and posting multiple times a day about your executive, having that kind of base understanding of what are the common threats that have happened in the past that other executives typically face, and starting with that base level, but then getting an in-depth knowledge of your executive's background and the issues that their particular brand or industry attracts. So you can start very broad to understand those issues, and then bubble down to what those kind of key risk terms, risk indicators would be surrounding those issues, so that you can capture the people that are truly going to cause a threat and not have to pay attention to all of the general conversations that are taking place.
It sounds like you need to get a really good handle on your adversaries, their motivations, their methods, their lingo.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier the importance of casting a wide net for collecting data. Where do you look for threatening posts?
The mainstream social media platforms are still extremely relevant. Those are still where the bulk of conversations take place. We are seeing an increase kind of up and down around some of the anti-censorship platforms that are starting to emerge.
So what types of posts or threatening content are you looking for? What comes up a lot during these queries?
Like I said, it's about grievances. That's where violence stems from. It's not always I'm going to kill you. It's people that are upset about something and feel like they are personally affected by actions of a company or by an executive. So that's really, I think, where you're going to find value and where you're really going to find those actionable, preventable threats, is by listening not just for the threatening terms, but for people that are upset and directing their emotions towards an individual.
That's a great insight. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you about data leaks. When you start studying OSINT, you suddenly become aware of the information that's revealed about yourself online and how bad guys can use that against you. Your job as a protector isn't just about spotting threats, it's also about keeping your principal's data and private info safe and secure. One specific issue I know you've touched a lot on in your work is doxings. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, doxing is the posting of personal identifiable information online publicly for other people to see and utilize So when I say that we're listening for mentions of an executive's address, that's exactly what I'm speaking to. Somebody found an old database, they know their neighbor, they delivered a pizza to their house, and they're angry at them. They take it on themselves to post their address online. There's other potential risk exposures, things like social security numbers, material that would allow them to pretend they're being a particular executive and start to build imposter accounts. But as far as physical security goes, when and where the executive is going to be is where that biggest risk is going to come from. If people leak their itinerary, they leak their home address, their child's school, those are all things that if, from a keyword approach, it's quite simple to monitor and make sure that they're not being leaked and spoken about or requested online.
Where do you tend to find these leaks? Mainstream websites or elsewhere?
It really depends how targeted the collection of that information is. We monitor a large chunk of the dark web and a lot of content that is dark in nature alongside of that. Forums that host large data breaches, things like the MGM Resort data breach, did have some personal addresses and personal details included in that. Those are the less targeted ones where you'll see them resurface on dark web. You'll see the LinkedIn data breach pop up a few times a year as different people repost it. So they'll post that as wide and far as they can in those scenarios.
Mention some of the types of information leaked online, birthdays, addresses, family names, social insurance numbers. These can seem maybe to some people kind of trivial. How do these types of leaks leave a principal vulnerable from a physical security perspective?
Social engineering. If I wanted to approach an executive and get into their life and learn more about them, if I can access their Amazon wish list and see the types of things they're buying, that makes for an easy in. You walk up to them and start talking about their interests, and suddenly you interject rock climbing into the conversation because you saw their mountain climbing equipment that they had on their wish list on Amazon. And you've got an in and a lead, and you start that relationship, and who knows how far it can go. And that's not just for executives, key employees that have access to confidential information. We're seeing threat actors bubble up in a lot of the critical infrastructure industries. Some of the recent malware attacks, like what had taken place with SolarWinds, and I believe there's a meat factory yesterday that had been faced with a giant breach. They're going to continue to find ways into these organizations and to gain intelligence and information that they can use and leverage to cause harm and disruptions. We need to make sure we're secure on every angle and every front as far as that is concerned.
If I'm an attacker, I might not even be targeting the top dog in the company. If I have a good profile on this individual, I can use that information to launch an attack on friends, family, colleagues, business connections.
Exactly. It's all about the people that have access.
So I want to turn back to the analysts in the GSOC. What advice would you have for them looking to learn more about OSINT and maybe specifically in regards to executive protection?
Some advice that I might give around that: don't be entirely dependent on an algorithm. Watch for trends, but you're not going to find those needle in a haystack threat actors or exposures that typically stem from those unique grievances I was speaking to, strictly relying on an algorithm. The artificial intelligence is not at the point of replacing a human and being able to pluck out what is truly and actually a threat or a leak in most scenarios. So I would advise listening for those common high-risk terms, and then also making sure you're adding those unique terms that apply to that particular executive or industry.
That sounds like it requires a lot more manual digging, keeping up with your adversaries, and keeping up with what's going on.
Yeah, and then from that point, automating that process and setting up immediate alerts on those highest risk terms that would need to be actioned as quickly as possible. And summary alerts or listening when you have that capabilities. There's a lot of factors to consider, things like if the executives are a household name, are there other ways people will refer to these executives by title, nicknames, usernames? Are the people responsible for monitoring this content a single person, one man, 9 to 5 show? Do they have multiple duties on top of executive protection? Or does that company have a 24/7 global security operations center or a focused executive protection team? We really need to take all of those things into account to make sure that our analysts and our clients are not experiencing alert fatigue. And if they are, take the steps to understand the cause and address that.
You mentioned alert fatigue, which I clued into right away. I think everyone can relate to being bombarded with posts, especially when you start talking about following, multiple social networks, alt tech sites, the dark web. What's your process for dealing with this challenge?
So you really want to make sure you're walking a fine line. Social listening should cast a net that is going to detect as many potential threats and vulnerabilities as possible, but you also need to keep that feed manageable and the alerts and the content that are being triggered.
I was talking to a colleague of ours that helps retailers with loss prevention and organized crime, and she was explaining to me the latest buzzword thieves are using to share fake coupons. It's this cat and mouse game that's always changing, and as much as we want to try to hit the easy button and automate all this stuff, it doesn't work that way.
Exactly. There's not a silver bullet solution for executive protection. It's always going to be a growing and expanding beast.
Since we're on the topic of continuing education, OSINT seems like one of those fields that's always changing. How do you continue to learn in order to stay on top of the things that are going on in your role?
I'm very fortunate in my role that I get to meet with a lot of different people that give me perspective into the responsibilities and risks of threat monitoring at a lot of different levels of organization across all verticals. And as I said, many different backgrounds, and they approach OSINT differently depending on their role. So I'm very lucky that I'm constantly learning from our clients and from the issues that they face. Typically, our product demonstrations at Liferaft are a very customized experience. And that means taking the time to understand their concerns and how they can use Navigator to automate and expand on their current monitoring programs or to build new ones from the ground up. And we need to make sure that that solution fits their need and their team so that we can assure success for them.
So, what's something that comes up a lot during these conversations?
People want an easy button. They want it to be as simple as possible with a low learning curve. One thing that we're working on right now is some type of query builder wizard where we'll be able to hit executive protection and you'll be taken to a format of a query that has some preset key terms, some preset formats, skeleton for you to start out your build with. So I think that's going to help our clients save a lot of time and start kind of in the middle of the learning curve of getting some of that monitoring up and running.
Kyle, thank you for joining me today.
Awesome, Rob. Thank you very much for having me. That was great.